So today we're going to talk about ventilator modes and waveforms, just a general overview. So we start out when every ventilator you think of trigger. Is it time, flow, pressure, patient effort, limit, or target, which is pressure or volume slash flow, or cycle? Well, like what ends the inspiration? Is it time, flow, volume, or pressure? So every mode that you will set, is it AC, assist control, pressure regulated volume control? It's a different combination of these three variables, okay? Trigger, target, cycle. Trigger, limit, cycle. So let's look at it. Volume control. Every time, every 10 seconds, 12 seconds, you get a breath, or every 5 seconds, you get a breath. That would be 12 breaths per minute. That would be volume control. It used to be called controlled mechanical ventilation. The target would be flow. So let's say you say, I want 50 liters per minute. That's how fast the volume will be given. And cycle, after it gives 500 cc's, it just shuts off. Okay. Volume assist is effort. So pressure or flow, that's the trigger. Then it still goes to the flow that you set, meaning that's what it will be set standard flow. And then volume, it still cycles off. Pressure control is time. Every 5 seconds, you're going to get a pressure inspiration. That's your target. That's the thing that remains constant throughout the breath. Okay, you could think of that. Target slash limit is what remains constant throughout the breath. And then every 5 seconds or so, it just, shuts off. Pressure assist, basically, you could start it by effort. Pressure support is effort. It's a lot like pressure control in that sense that when you're breathing in, pressure inspiratory is your target, but then the flow is when it stops. When you say to yourself, okay, I'm stopping to breathe, that's when the cycle ends, as opposed to pressure control, which is set time. Okay, so now we got that. Assist control, like I said, the flow is set. The So that's the limiter. You choose a flow rate. You choose whether or not to give that flow throughout the whole breath. Let's say it's 50 liters per minute. You could have it giving 500 cc's at 50 liters per minute the whole time, or you could have a decelerating flow. You could have you set what you set as the tidal volume. You set the respiratory rate, PEEP, FiO2. The pressure is dependent, rises and falls dependent on the compliance. So volume control guarantees minute ventilation, but it doesn't guarantee your airway pressure. And early ARDS, your peak and plateau pressures, which we'll go over, can climb unless you're actively monitoring it. A SIP pressure control, now you set a pressure. You say, I want, let's say, a pressure. So remember, the bad pressure is what we call plateau pressure, greater than 30. So that means think of the lung as a balloon. When you inflate the balloon, if you would stop after inflating it and feel that pressure coming back, that's if it's 30 or more, that's a high pressure. Okay, so we would typically, let's say you have a PEEP of 10, then you would want the inspiratory pressure above PEEP to be less than 20, so that the whole thing is less than 30. So that's additive for your total pressure. And you also set an inspiratory time, because that is how fast the breath is going to come, breath to breath. Tidal volume is dependent, it varies breath to breath with the compliance and resistant. The decelerating flow distributes gas more evenly, is often better tolerated, but if compliance worsens, tidal volume falls silently. Minute ventilation is the number you need to watch. So when you look at these head to head, so assist control, you think tidal volume is set, pressure is dependent, you set the flow pattern, and guarantees a minute ventilation. And typical use is lung protective ventilation and close pressure monitoring. Pressure control, you set an inspiratory pressure. Remember, the inspiratory pressure plus the PEEP is the total pressure. The tidal volume is dependent on whatever pressure you set. Flow pattern is decelerating. It's often more comfortable. Guarantees a pressure ceiling, and the priority is limiting PEEP plateau or peak. And it does give you a little bit more patient comfort and synchrony. There is a thing called pressure regulated volume control. I just want to make sure it's still videoing here. So PRVC AC is basically the operator sets a target volume, and the ventilator auto adjusts the inspiratory pressure breath to breath. It's basically like a pressure control breath. It's decelerating flow, fixed pressure, and but it gives you the guarantee of volume control. So on the Draeger ventilators, you press ACVC and you go to auto flow on. That basically makes it a pressure regulated volume control. So breath to breath, it says, you know what, I'm targeting 500 cc's. I saw that only 24 gave me pressure of 24 gave me 450, so I'm going to go to 26 the next breath. So it's really a pressure control mode, but it's trying to get that volume control guarantee. It compares the delivered tidal volume of the last breath to the target. Pro is a volume guarantee plus the comfort of decelerating flow. The con is it's a slow breath-to-breath pressure creep, can mask rapidly worsening compliance. You should watch the trend, not just the number. Then there is airway pressure release ventilation, which is actually easier to understand. A lot of people get nervous about it, but I'll show you. Most of the cycle is spent in high pressure, held for a long time, sustained recruitment. And then what happens is that's a pressure high, a T high, which I'm going to show you what that means, and a pressure low and a T low. Those are timed release to a low pressure for a short time. The way to understand APRV is just think of yourself going on a boat very fast, opening up your mouth. If you open your mouth as you're going through the boat, you feel that air. That's a positive pressure. Now imagine the boat automatically just stops for a second. So it stops. You blow out really fast. That's the release ventilation. That's actually when you ventilate. As long as you're opening up your mouth, driving the boat, you're getting a pressure. You could actually breathe while you're riding that boat, going really fast and the air coming in. You could breathe. Spontaneous breathing is preserved. So here's what APRV looks like. So you're coasting along at a P high of 35, and that's 3.5 time high, and then 0.5, the low 0.5 half a second, your P low is P0, and then that's where you get the release ventilation. If there was a volume here, you would see that's where your volume comes out. So P high, T high, P low, T low. It's not that hard to understand. Basically, it keeps the lungs open. There's a short T low on purpose because you don't want to fully de-recruit, and some people use it as a rescue maneuver. Trying to see if you could oxygenate when you can. We try to avoid it in obstructive lung disease. Of course, T low, if it's too long, you de-recruit, but if it's too short, you might air trap. We don't really use APRV that often anymore because of, we're frowning upon APR, high pressures. So anyway, when you do a ventilator, remember the things that we look for are lung protective ventilation, 6 to 8 cc's per kilogram. We try to get the PEEP plateau less than 30. Then we want to make sure that the PEEP is adequate. Remember, in an obese patient, you're going to want to increase that PEEP because they're going to try to generate a breath. And if their pleural pressure is so high, you have to overcome that with actually giving a little PEEP. And then we have a thing called driving pressure, which is plateau pressure minus PEEP. We try to make that less than 15. A Matos trial, but we'll look at that. So P plateau minus PEEP is 28 minus 12, 16. That's a little high, so you'll probably lower the tidal volume to try to get that lower or increase the PEEP. So let's go over some basic waveforms. This talk will just be a basic talk. We'll look at things like pressure versus time, pressure and time. We'll look at flow versus time. And then, here's an example of, breathing, getting the breath in and out, volume versus time. So we're going to take a look at that. So here you could see this is an example of assist control where you have a set flow. Let's say it's 50 liters per minute, and the pressure will be dependent on on the flow. And here you have where you're setting a pressure. Remember, it's pressure control. So every, let's say, 5 seconds, you're getting that breath. You could see now flow dependent. Flow is dependent and it's decelerating. So this is a more comfortable. So this is how would the flow would look like on pressure control, and this is how it typically would look like on assist control. You could do a decelerating flow rate ramp on the assist control, but still that initial flow is set. Okay, that's the difference. You would have the initial flow every time the same. Okay, so we'll just look at common dyssynchronies just to understand. So flow starvation, there's a thing called double triggering, ineffective triggering, auto peep, reverse triggering. I'm just going to show you what that is, just so you get just an understanding. A concave scoop dip in the pressure curve during inspiration. That means patient demand exceeds the set flow. Double triggering is 2 stacked breaths with little or no exhalation between. That means that your inspiratory time is higher than what is set, so you want it to do it longer. Breathe in longer. Ineffective triggering is a small flow pressure deflection that fails to trigger a breath. Usually auto peep raises the trigger threshold, and auto peep is expiratory flow doesn't return to zero before the next breath. Trap gas. And then there's reverse triggering, which is a small spontaneous deflection during the expiratory phase of a mandatory breath. If you know these 5, you know basically what you need to know. The takeaways, and we're going to look at just some of the synchronies, but every mode has trigger, target, cycle. Volume control guarantees volume, pressure guarantees pressure. PRVC tries to do both. APRV is a little different. It's not a rate and tidal volume, it's a pressure time profile. And waveforms are real-time dyssynchrony detector, and we're going to learn the shapes. So here's flow starvation. So you have somebody, this is, you could see pressure versus time. So pressure's up, and then all of a sudden there's a concave dip. That means the patient's trying to, let's see, patient's inspiratory demand exceeds the operator set flow. Patient pulls against the fixed flow. It's a concave inward bowing of the pressure plateau. Um, Usually it's flat. Flow starvation makes it set. So we're going to see actual examples. Double triggering. Here's a normal breath. Here it's flow versus time. And boom, he gets, there's no exhalation between the breaths. And the patient really in this case, you want to increase inspiratory time because he wants to have a longer inspiratory time. So that's sort of easy to see. That's the easiest and the most common trigger dyssynchrony. Ineffective trigger means that in order for you to trigger a breath, you have to either have a flow or an effort, pressure sensor, and the patient generates genuine effort, but doesn't cross. There's a trigger to get the ventilator to give you that flow. And if you see that small upward deflection on the flow tracing between the delivered breaths, that is ineffective triggering if you don't see a subsequent jump there. Usually it's a problem with auto peep, and we'll get more into that. This is auto peep. This is, again, flow versus time. And what's happening is this is the true line of zero. And instead of the flow going all the way up to this line, see, this is the expiratory flow over here. This is the inspiratory flow. And then this is the expiratory flow. It should go all the way to this line, but it's going to here, and then before you get the next breath. So you're in complete emptying, and that will lead to what we call auto peep. Reverse triggering is when you start to see downward deflection of the pressure versus time, and it's a time triggered mandatory breath. This is more of a reflexive diaphragmatic contraction during the expiratory phase. They're not quite sure why this happens. Again, this is the less common thing, like on the boards, if you don't make out any of the other ones, you start thinking, oh, maybe it's reverse triggering. Sometimes it's too much sedation could be associated with it. So just to show you some um, general flow, just so you understand. And let me make sure that I'm still being videoed here. Yes, I'm still being videoed. So here we go. You basically, this is volume control. So you see the set flow, inspiration, expiration, and that's what it would look like. Now, if you have the flow not going to zero, that would be incomplete. That's auto PEEP developing here. That's an example. Of course, I didn't go over one of the most basic elements here is this is on pressure volume control. The pressure normally goes up and then it would come down. If you do a inspiratory hold, that's how you get the plateau pressure. And the set PEEP is how high you set that pressure upon expiration. Okay, so this is what we look for plateau pressure, an inspiratory hold, and that tells you the compliance of the lungs. And now I'm just going to show you a few of these synchronies. So one is ineffective triggering. So again, you see flow, and it's starting, the person is trying to breathe in, but it's not going over. It's not generating another breath. Here you can see it's going there and it's generating a breath. It didn't quite make it over here. That's ineffective triggering. Double triggering, you're going to see two flows back to back, right? Two flows, two breaths back to back. This one is easy, increase inspiratory time. This one could be, hey, I have to look for auto PEEP. What's going on? Flow starvation is also an easy one to see because you see pressure. This one is pressure, and you're seeing as the pressure goes up. Remember, without a plateau pressure check, this is what a normal pressure curve would look like. But if you see this concave dip, you know the patient's flow that was set was not high enough, so you have to go up on the flow. Here's an example of delayed cycling. So again, pressure, and what's happening here is that at the end you see a scoop here. So he is taking a breath and he's saying, you know what? I want the breath to change because my inspiration is actually too long. So you could see in this case, the pressure curve here, my inspiration is too long. I want to lower it as opposed to the double triggering where I increase the inspiratory time. This is a case where the inspiratory time is too much. No flow during inspiration on the flow. He's supposed to be inspiring here, but he's all of a sudden stopped expiration. You see this blip on the pressure curve here. So on the pressure curve, you could see um, the pressure rise at the end. That would tell you that this is too long of an inspiratory time. He's trying to breathe out. And this one is an example of the same thing. You see the flow is over here, and the pressure at the end shoots up because he's trying to blow out already. He's trying to expire. As opposed to this one, this is a little more complicated, but this is after the breath. This is what we call premature termination dyssynchrony. He makes an inspiratory effort early in the expiratory phase. So he wanted to have a longer breath. So this is a little confusing, but hopefully you get it. So the ones that you look for a flow starvation. That's the easiest one. You increase the inspiratory flow. That's a concave dip in the airway pressure during inspiration. Ineffective triggering would be the small negative pressure or flow deflection without a delivered breath. Double triggering, that's the easiest one to see. Back to back, auto PEEP. And like here's an example of flow that's coming, but no big breath. So that would be ineffective triggering, right? That would be ineffective triggering. Whereas what's the problem here? You see 1, 2, that would be 2 breaths back to back. That would be double triggering, okay? So to review, To review, we went over the basics: trigger, target, cycle, pressure control, volume control. We went over some of the terminology, flow synchronies. You can go back and forth in this video and you'll understand the basics.